Good afternoon, Robert Scribbler. It is September 19th, 2018. Thank you for joining me for another climate change and clean energy video blog. Now, for this segment, I am going to talk about some major movements that appear to be ongoing in the global energy market as it relates to fossil fuel investment and divestment. But before I get into that, I'd just like you to think about this question. How can and how should worsening hurricanes, worsening heat waves, and worsening weather disasters due to human-caused climate change, amplified by human-caused climate change, how can these disasters impact the energy market, and how should they? Because the energy that we use and the related carbon emissions that some energy sources produce are the primary fuel for the worsening extreme events that we are seeing today. And there is growing scientific evidence and growing scientific understanding of how these energy sources, primarily fossil fuel burning, results in the worsening damage that we are now seeing. Now, this satellite image is of Hurricane Florence, and we have recently seen a scientific study showing that human-caused climate change, among other things, increased Florence's rainfall by about 50%. And that's just one example. I'm going to talk a bit more about an ongoing drought in the Southwest later today that is also being amplified by human-caused climate change and is causing cities like Phoenix to take a serious look at their long-term water supply from Lake Mead, for example. And these impacts have serious financial and material consequences that impact us all. So from the individual to the boardroom to our governmental bodies, we need to be making choices that stop making these disasters worse. And one corporation in Japan, the Marubeni Corporation, has recently made that choice. Marubeni has recently decided to move away from coal and to double its portfolio size for clean energy. I'm just going to read you a couple of quotes from this article by Tim Buckley, who is an energy and finance analyst and consultant. And Tim Buckley notes, Japan's Marubeni Corporation, one of the world's largest and most significant developers of coal-fired power plants, has announced a major decision to distance itself from coal going forward. An 18th September release by Marubeni recognizes that climate change threatens the coexistence of the global environment and society, and is a threat to Marubeni's business and its shareholders. Marubeni will begin the process of pulling out of coal-fired power generation with a target to have its coal-fired capacity by 2030. Moreover, as a general principle, Marubeni will no longer enter into any new coal-fired projects. So, a serious consequence of understanding, of awakening understanding of the link between human-caused climate change and the damaging events that we are now seeing across the globe, impacting investment decision-making, in particular, a move by Marubeni to divest from fossil fuels. I'm just going to go ahead and read another quote from this article. I think it's a fantastic article. I'm going to link it and recommend that you read the whole thing. Tim Buckley notes, as hurricanes and tornadoes batter America and Asia, climate change as a risk to business portfolios is becoming mainstream, and the divestment from climate-destroying coal is gathering remarkable momentum. Other major Asian coal plant developers, such as the Korean giants POSCO and KEPCO will now be having intense boardroom discussions. And I expect we will see Japanese, Korean, and other major trading conglomerates follow Marubeni's lead. Well, let's hope that's the case. It's worth noting that Marubeni controls about 11 gigawatts worth of power generation overseas, and that it currently holds about 3 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity. It's a major exporter of coal generation technology around the world, so its plan to divest from coal will have a ripple effect on global markets. It's also worth noting that Marubeni is stating as a goal that it will double its share of electricity generated from renewables in its net power supply from 10% to 20% in just 5 years by 2023. So a positive action by Marubeni to divest from coal and invest in clean energy. And to this point, I'd just like to note that the global divestment movement, which in the statement from the New Yorker began as a grassroots protest, is now starting to hit the radar in oil companies as a material risk to their securities filings. So this is kind of ironic, because early on in the divestment movement, when people like Bill McKibben were starting to promote divestment, that there was this big media blitz, big marketing blitz by the fossil fuel special interests to say that, well, divestment doesn't matter. If someone takes money out of a fossil fuel industry, someone else will just magically appear to be there to invest in the fossil fuel. So it's just an exercise in futility. It's not worth anything. Well, oil companies are now starting to recognize that the divestment movement is gaining steam and represents a risk to their globally harmful business model. So good news on the divestment front, bad news for fossil fuel investors. To this point, I would just like to add that divestment is something that we can all do. It is a peaceful activity that basically any of us who hold any money, any form of investment can go to our investment portfolios, our retirement portfolios, and say, look, we're not going to put any more money into the fossil fuel industry, which is presently engaged in activities that are harming our environment and that put everyone living on the face of our earth at risk, everything living on the face of our earth at risk. People talk about the need for a green revolution. Well, a green revolution in finance that takes away the capital necessary for new fossil fuel projects is a very effective mechanism for keeping fossil fuels in the ground. And we can see that now. It is also a moral message and one that carries the weight of the risk of harms caused by human-caused climate change, a very rational weight of risk that is now causing boardrooms across the world to reassess their priorities. So just an understanding of how effective choices, individual, corporate, government, city, state, global, can have an impact on the trajectory of a system that at present is causing a great deal of harm, but that due to the opportunity provided by renewable energy and falling renewable energy prices and increasing access and availability of access to renewable energy, now has the opportunity to transform.